Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for other writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is Andrew Zinnes. Now, let's see if I got this right. He's a screenwriter. I want to say director.
Not a director.
Not a director. Okay, I'm gonna think of that other Andrew Zinnes.
That's right.
So he's a screenwriter and he's author, and he's got several books about filmmaking and writing. And the one we're going to be talking about today is a guerrilla guide, the Screenwriters Advice from popular and award-winning film, TV, and streaming shows. Now, co-written with, I want you to pronounce her name because I'm going to mess it up no matter what.
Genevieve Jolliffe.
Genevieve Jolliffe. And for those who are watching and or listening, Andrew is in the UK, and this is the first. I've known him for a couple of years. We've interacted via email. Honestly, because he was in the UK, I thought he was a UK, as we were discussing before we started recording, a subject of the realm. Not so. He is a Yank, who is now married to a subject of the realm.
Yes. Yes, I am indeed. Whenever anybody says, how'd you end up here? I say I did something silly. I married a British girl. And here you are. That's what happens.
Okay. Oh, that is fantastic. And I will say that part of the reason I know Andrew is that I had him as a Q&A on my blog, Maximum Z, way back in December of 2018.
Wow.
Definitely in the before times.
Wow. Wow. Was it that long ago?
It is. I had to look it up because I knew we'd done
Jeez.
that, and I was like, when exactly was that? Because I wanted to bring it up because I just wanted to see that exact look of shock and surprise on your face that you just had.
Yeah, it's not like anything's happened in between now and then.
Oh yeah, just a couple of things here and there, but nothing worth
Yeah.
writing home about. So Andrew, and for all listeners and viewers of the show are familiar, we like to start things off talking about things we may have read or watched lately. And I will go first just to give Andrew a little time to collect his thoughts. Recently, it was July 4th, as it was everywhere, but here in America, it's a special kind of holiday. And so our local specialty movie house, they had a very special screening of that 4th of July classic known as Jaws. And this is not the first time I'd seen it, but I think it was the first time I'd seen it on the big screen. And it still is effective. And I think part of it loses its punch because if you've seen it like, dozens and dozens of times, it's still effective, but only to a certain point. But like when Ben Gardner's head pops out of the bottom of the boat, that's still scary. When Roy Scheider sees the shark swim by for the first time, that still gives you goosebumps. But the rest of it, still great to see. And of course, Robert Shaw's monologue about the Indianapolis, it's just a great time at the movies. Had a wonderful time with that. So that's is that it for me? Yeah, I think that's it for me. So I will toss it over to Andrew just to see what he's been up to.
Now, is this limited to movies or is this limited to television or
Oh no,
whatever?
and TV and or
Anything.
movies, whatever
Okay.
whatever has been invading your eyeballs.
Well, we actually just watched, on the advice of a few people, we watched The Hitman on, I think it's
Oh,
Amazon Prime?
Netflix.
Netflix.
Okay.
Okay. And it was, I didn't realize that Richard Linklater had directed it and written it. Because when we were watching it, we were kind of like, this feels a little, it's very talky for what's going on. And we're just like, this doesn't, and in a certain way, we were thinking, is this a first-time filmmaker, maybe a second-time filmmaker? Because it was just, it was more skewed for how high concept the thing was. Okay. And I thought Glenn Powell did a fantastic, is that his name, Glenn Powell?
Yeah,
I think
Glenn Powell.
He did a fantastic job. I don't know the name of the woman who plays the lead, but she was good too. I was still not sure whether it actually was based on something true. I mean, they said it was, but I was a little like, I was a little questioning, really, you're just going to let this guy who's a teacher go out there and be a hitman and pretend to be a hitman when he's normally just the guy? So there's some plausibility stuff that I was not sure about, but there was some fun dialogue between, and I liked how he sort of evolved over time, became more the person that he was portraying. That was a lot of fun. And then at the end, when I did see that it was Richard Linklater, I was like, now that makes a lot more sense why it is being portrayed the way they are. But overall, I thought it was enjoyable. I thought it was fun. I wouldn't say it was like the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. I
Mhm.
thought some of the plot points were a little questionable, and the initial thing, but if you just kind of turn your brain off and watch it's fun.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, that is Hitman on Netflix. Okay. Well, I'd heard a lot of good things about it, but also there were raves, but not super enthusiastic raves. I guess
Yeah.
that's probably the best way to put it.
Yes. That's, yeah, 100%. That's how I would put it too.
Okay. Though, okay, so we can add that to your Netflix queue, or because it's streaming, so you can just watch it whenever you darn well feel like it. Okay, so Andrew, let's start things off talking about you. So were you the type of writer that, you've been writing as long as you can remember, or did you kind of like, you were averse to it in the beginning, and then you were kind of like grew into it, kind of like, hey, I like doing this. I got a knack for this. I think I'm going to do it some more.
Yeah, it's probably more like that last way that you just said. I never really wrote a lot when I was a kid. I never did at all. I mean, a bit, but not to that extent. I was more music oriented. In fact, I thought that's the track I was going to go down at one point. But when I was looking at going into where I was going, what I was going to do at school, I found myself going down a TV route, and then fell in love with film itself. And through circus, always wanted to live in Southern California. So when I moved out to LA, I started working in development. And that was a really great way to get into understanding, well, at least from a commercial place, what people like to read, what sells, and seeing at the level of quality of writing that gets purchased. And then even beyond that, the level of writing that gets made. And even though I had learned a lot of story theory in college and whatnot. This you could actually now see it more in practice at a professional level, and being able to talk in those terms and reading thousands and thousands of scripts, over the time that I was doing that really helped me inform of, what to look for, and also, how to be able to talk to a writer in their terms. Okay.
I would actually, I want to ask you really quick. As you're reading all these scripts, was it really a quick study to identify this is good writing, this is not good writing?
That came faster than I thought it would. It really did. Because when I first started moving, I was always sort of impressed at anybody who could complete a feature screenplay. I was like, wow, that's 120 pages, and then it makes sense and everything. That's amazing. And then pretty soon you realize, oh, yeah, a lot of people are doing this. And then even more so, you're like, oh, and it's not that a lot of people are bad. It's a lot of people are okay.
Hmm.
There's a lot of sort of, that part's all right. That part works. That's a nice line. I like that character. But the whole thing is, the sustained amazingness throughout. That was the needle in the haystack that was difficult
Hmm.
to find. And that, realizing that happened a lot faster than I thought it would.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just had a question. So you're reading, you identify what's good and what's not good. Uh, did that have an effect on your writing as well?
Yeah. Yes, 100%. When I finally did make the switch after I stopped working in development, I don't know, after 10 or 12 years, I forget what it is now. And then I started writing, actually, as I started writing with my wife, it was really informative, because now all of a sudden well, first of all, I was thinking in terms of, what kind of characters we'd be looking for, and how their development was over, how that developed over the whole story. More importantly, what are the typical structure points, and what roughly happens here or there, so that when we were making choices, based on who the character was, we could say, okay, well, they need this to happen, it should happen about here. Now, what can we do based on who they are and what we set up? And then, that totally informed me that, when I was reading stuff, and all of a sudden crazy decisions the writers were making that had nothing to do, or nothing that was
Hmm.
set up, or came out of nowhere, or wasn't as obvious
Hmm.
as, going for less obvious things, that but still within what could happen.
Okay.
That was one of the biggest things that.
Yeah, actually, that is a question I just came back to me. So as you're reading all these scripts, were there, I guess, common details that a lot of them seem to have that worked against the script? Because like one of the things that I've seen a lot is like a lot of how do we know that type writing, where the like, a writer will talk about like something someone's thinking or what they're really supposed to be doing, or
Mm.
that it's just overly descriptive or it's just big blocks of text. I mean, was there anything that you kind of saw like a repeating element that a lot of writers tended to be doing that was working against them?
A lot of that kind of stuff, that's really more emerging writer kind of thing. A
Hmm.
lot of that had been filtered out. Every now and again, you would get big blocks of chunks of text and so on down the way. And every now and again, and yeah, you would get some, over description of wardrobe or over
Hmm.
description of the location or things like that. A lot of that, to be frank, had been filtered out because we were reading stuff that was repped.
Ah,
And,
okay.
when by the time it was coming through William Morris, or it was coming through, well, whatever, even the more boutique agencies, a lot of that stuff had been filtered out. Now, if I've been when I'm doing stuff for at the time like screenplay competitions and Scriptapalooza or one of those kind of things, yeah, then you get a lot of that, you know.
Okay.
But I think probably the biggest thing that I saw was uh, a lot of derivative scripts,
Oh, okay.
because this was in the late 90s and everyone was doing specs because of Shane Black. And
Right.
so they were
And
getting
everybody wanted to be Quentin Tarantino.
a lot of that, a lot of too cool for school kind of scripts or what, and
Sure.
I can understand why. I can understand why they would
Hmm.
do that. But yeah, that was more the main thing, was nothing super original or breaking the mold.
So that you were eventually reading a lot more, as you said, filtered through the professional level of scripts, and so
Mhm.
that I think that's a great segue to talk about your book, Guerrilla Guide: Screenwriters Advice from Popular and Award-Winning Film, TV, and Streaming Shows. That it was not what I was expecting when I opened it up,
Oh,
because I really I thought it was just going to be about like addressing the reader as like, okay, here's what you need to do, and it turns out that you cover this really wide variety of topics, but you have answers that are provided by, is it like 3 dozen or 4 dozen
nearly three. Yeah,
working
34.
writers,
Yeah,
and yeah, in
34.
TV and film, and some of them are also dipping into streaming. Like one person talks about them writing for an audio podcast type of storytelling, and I
Yep.
just thought, what a great way to show writers like here's how the professionals have done it. It's not necessarily saying this is how you should do it, but this is what worked for them, so this is something you should consider. So what was really the idea for putting this whole book together? Let's start at the very beginning.
Sure. Well, you've actually hit the nail right on the head with your first comment there. The book series that this comes from is called the Guerrilla Filmmakers Handbook series, and that's what my wife Genevieve, she created that in the 90s here in the UK. And at the time, first of all, there weren't many filmmaking books then, and there were most of the books, and even still to this day, a lot of the books that or even the sources that emerging people have or anyone uses are usually written by one person from their point of view. If you think of, Sid Field, or you think of Blake Snyder, or, you get into the filmmaking books, which is all blanking on me right now.
Well, I
So
was going to
forgive me,
say in
but
Robert McKee.
Robert McKee, right? Any of those are screenwriting. Yeah, but yes, um, and what they were making films here, and what they quickly realized is, one, no one was sharing information. It was very much a closed shop here, and two, that because of that, they were making all these horrible filmmaking mistakes about how you spend money and who you prepare and how to work with different craft people, because they're just winging it kind of. So what they decided to do is write these books based on a Q&A style of interviewing the person who does that craft day in and day out, and then asking them the top 10, 15 questions that someone, a producer or director coming in, would need to know about that craft. Okay. And so because of that, you get the style that you just talking about, where it's not us saying anything, it's them saying it. The challenge we had with Screenwriters Advice was that everybody does the same thing. So if we just asked everybody the same 10, 15 questions, it'd be a very short book.
Hmm.
So what we did was turn it into more of a round table sort of discussion, which is sort of ask one question and then have 3 or 4 people answer it, and in order to give you a deeper discussion on the topic.
Okay, so I did want to ask, so I did notice that you don't have every single writer answer a question, but is that how
No,
did you have like a select list of questions and you send it to a select group of the writers that you were working with? So kind of like, these 5 writers, we're going to ask them these questions, and these 5 writers, we're going to ask them these other 5 questions. Like, what was your process for putting it all together?
that's pretty close to what it was. We we knew that we surveyed all the screenwriting books from the last 40 years or so and said, how did they do things, and tried to look for things that people hadn't done before. So in the first half, we knew, first of all, everyone's going to want crafty questions. That's just screenwriting book. So we
Sure.
knew the first half of the book would be that, and then the back half of the book would be more genre and businessy oriented stuff. So yeah, when we were looking at these things, we would say, who could we get, to talk about story structure, and who could we get to talk about character development? Who could we get to talk about horror films? Who could we get to talk about this or that, the other thing? And so, yes, we were probably doing hour-long interviews with each writer.
Hmm.
Okay. But certainly asking them specific questions about their genre, their platform, or what they're working in more usually, and then um, specific craft kind of questions. And then everybody got asked 2 or 3 questions that are right at the very end of the book about what inspires them and
Hmm.
advice you'd give and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, that is one of the things because as we were discussing before we started recording, I think it's a great resource for writers because it's, as you said, it's really not just about craft. I mean, as you said, like the first half, ideas, pitching, characters, dialogue, and then you get into like what happens after you're done with the script, competitions and writing teams and writer's room, writing on set,
Yeah.
all of these things that a lot of books don't talk about. And also I think that I've noticed this in a few other books, especially with ones from like the past mostly like 5 to 10 years, that a lot of them don't just focus on the craft of writing. They also are focusing on the business aspect of it. Like
Mm,
you had a page. It was like, what's the difference between an option and a shopping agreement? And
right.
you explain it in very simple layman's terms that it's easy for someone who's just starting out to identify what the difference is between these two things in case that should ever come up. And I just think that's why it's so good, because it's not just about the writing, it's about the business part. And a lot of books don't cover that. Like when I started, if you said like, what's the difference between an option and a shopping agreement? I said, I have no idea. And there was really nowhere I could look, even online, to find out, because like they'd say, just have your attorney handle it. It's like, well, no, what if I don't have an attorney? And
Exactly.
so I think, was that part of your overall plan was like, okay, we're going to focus a little bit on craft, but we're also going to focus on the business and the commerce part of it.
Yes, because you really can't get away from it these days. I mean, it's, no longer do I think a writer can just sit in their
Hmm.
room and just clack away and then throw it out there. I mean, especially if you're going to get up into at a professional level. I mean, you're going to be engaging probably an agent or a manager or a lawyer. And as you said, you should know what these things mean. And if you're not, if you're doing it at a indie level or lower level, I'm not sure what lower than indie would be, but not non pro or non studio or non broadcast, then you can get into a lot of trouble really quick if you don't know what a shopping agreement is versus an option, what all those things happen. And yeah, you get a lot of stuff online and whatnot, but it's one thing reading that, and it's another hearing someone say, "Oh, I went through it. I had a shopping agreement, and blah 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 blah, blah happened to me." And then we always, whenever that was the impetus for those little, we call them box out, informational box outs, was
Hmm.
add context and to some of the little the buzzwords and keywords, was just to make sure everyone was on the same page.
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the things I thought was really unique about the book is that you go into genre. And I
Yeah.
don't think, honestly, I don't think I've seen that before, because you're talking to writers with experience in I know specific genres. I know like Beck and Woods, who did A Quiet Place. They
Mhm.
are prevalently featured throughout the book, not just about the writing, but also about their experience with A Quiet Place and
Yep.
all the work they did with it and working with the studios on putting it
Hmm.
together. And you also had Meg LaFauve, who wrote Inside Out and now Inside Out 2. So she's talking
Yep.
about animation, but she's also talking about developing characters and dialogue and structure.
Hmm.
And I just thought it was really great that you don't usually get to see that kind of insight into genre writing. It's usually just about here, write your script and here's how you do it. Good luck.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the things that was one of the things we saw too. We saw that maybe over the last 40 years, so there's been one book in the 80s who kind of did something like that. And
Hmm.
I mean, I think things have changed a little bit since 1985 or six or whenever it
Just a
came out,
little bit.
just a little bit. So it was great to get that take. Now, what was interesting, I think, and I probably, when you get to the real crafty stuff, whenever we said like to Meg, is there anything like how do you do a villain when you're doing family friendly stuff? And she's like, oh well, we don't really think of them as villains. We still apply a lot of the traditional things that you would to any hero or any character to them, but maybe they're a little less villainous, or maybe it's something more internal that's the problem, or and it was great to see things, see those little nuances, those little subtleties about how the standard gets bent a little bit
Hmm.
for the genre.
Yeah, so I wanted to say it's great that also all of these writers have different opinions about all these different subjects, and of course, nobody's path to success was anything like anybody else's. It was all different and specific to themselves. But you have this just wealth of information presented. Did you have to? Was there any stuff you couldn't use, or like you said, okay, we've already got enough stuff in this chapter on structure. We don't need these extra three comments. Was there any cutting or editing or like, oh, okay, this is a little too wordy. We we got to cut down what Bob said,
Uh,
that sort of thing.
I wouldn't. Let me think about that. There might have been some so long ago. I'm sure there was some redundant stuff that was sort
Okay.
of, two writers may have said something very similar. Who said it? It was a combination of, well, who said it more eloquently
Ah,
with,
okay.
or clearly with, we haven't, we need somebody to be put in that place. So this person's been in a lot. We need to feature that person a little bit more. So there was a little bit of politicking, balancing, let's call it that,
Okay. Yeah,
a little bit too.
I was going to say, I also wanted to say that they also mentioned throughout the book that I guess you started this, was it before lockdown started?
Yeah, actually, we did did we?
Well,
Yes,
because a couple of the writers are
yes,
talking about like COVID's hit, and because a lot of them are talking about, especially when they're talking about doing meetings and just
right.
kind of
Zoom
like production.
meetings.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
talking about how first some of them talk about how that it was like the awkward in-person type of thing, or it was like a phone call, and then that there's like a gradual rollout, like more and more of them talking about
yeah,
dealing with Zoom. I think it was oh, it was someone had a Zoom call with Steve Martin on a project.
yeah. That would have been Ben Philippe who did. He was
Yeah.
right.
Oh, well, only
Only
murders in the building.
murders in
That's
building.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. And it was
yeah,
just kind of like, that's something that, a writer daydreams about, like, oh,
yeah,
I'm gonna have a Zoom call with, fill in name a big star. And all of a sudden you do because it's just the easier way to do it. And I think part of that is also because not everybody who was featured in the book lives in LA. Because like
yeah,
some of them are in Canada, and I guess they're just, or some of them are abroad, somewhere in Europe,
hmm.
maybe.
Some are in Europe. Yep, the many. We kind of got people from around the world. We got Canadians and Mexicans and a lot of Americans and Brits. Yeah, I think it's funny you say that. And actually, just to that point, Beck and Woods, one of them lives in LA, and I think one of them lives in like Iowa or
Oh,
Indiana. So, said that, yeah, well, we've been doing Zoom long before, or phone calls or whatever the video chat was
I
before.
I think didn't one of them say like it's actually a good thing we don't work like in the same room because then we
Yeah,
never
because it
get
wouldn't do
anything
anything.
done?
Yeah, yeah, you just stare at each other.
Yeah, or they just be
Um,
cracking jokes all day.
yes. The other funny thing about the Zoom was and this is just when one of the things we wanted with so many opinions is you get a lot of personal preference about things and across the board. So on Zoom, there was one person who loved Zoom. she was like, why do I have to, if I don't know if some of your people are from LA, but you probably heard there's a lot of traffic and driving around isn't to,
I've heard
to
that.
having the driving for an hour to a half an hour, 45-minute meeting just to drive an hour back. And now your day's kind of wasted. And who knows what that meeting was. She was like so glad that all she had to do was go online and have that 45-minute meeting and then be done. And then she could get on with writing or whatever she's doing. And then I had other people. Then there was another person who said he didn't. Sometimes you get really nervous pitching, and if he's seeing someone in their space and it's all messy and whatnot, and there's takeout cartons in the back or
Oh,
whatever.
because they were talking about that you are getting onto this call and your expectation is like, oh, this is a really important person like at the studio or the production
Right,
company, and they're just going to be like, all not high and mighty. They're going to be all like real important looking, and it's like
right,
got a ratty T-shirt, and he's had a
right.
ton of takeout
He's
containers
just a
behind
guy
them.
or a girl, right? And yes, and then, then you had people on the other side who are like, oh my God, it's terrible. You just see them and they don't put their camera on and God knows what they're doing. So you're just talking to the void, or you're there, you see them actually texting or
Hmm.
something on the side and or you don't get any energy back from it because and also things are delayed. So when you
Hmm.
think there would be the natural laugh, it's like a second or two later and it feels weird. Are you talking? Am I talking? So it was just that's kind of a nice thing for the book is that you did get on that and many other topics. You'll see different points of view on the same thing.
Yeah, and I think what was really good is that a lot of the right, I don't know if it was a specific chapter, it was part of a chapter, but it was almost like, I guess, horror stories from pitching and or meetings. Like someone talks about how, that one of the someone fell asleep while they were doing their
Yeah,
pitch. It was like,
yeah,
how do and I guess there was other ones like there, someone was just kind of like half listening. And I think someone handled it really well. I don't know if it was the same story, but they could tell even just a couple of minutes into the pitch that the rep or the producer they were pitching to was not in. They could tell they were not interested. Their eyes were
right.
glazing over, and I
Yeah,
guess they just stopped it at their pitch. And I really wish I written it down. What they said, it's something like, "Okay, I can tell this isn't working for you."
yeah,
And it wasn't just like I'm just going to go now. It was like, okay, I can tell this isn't working. What is it that is not appealing to you? Like they tried to spin it around to like really salvage it. And I was just like, that's really smart
yes,
because I can see a writer just becoming totally crushed and like okay, and the story they put so much time and effort and they're like pitching their heart out and you just got this like this stone face stare back and you can tell okay I'm not going to win this person over, but to be able to pivot like that and think okay how can I turn this at least somewhat to my advantage. I just thought that was just fantastic.
yeah, yeah. I think it might have been Eli Craig who said that. There are two people who sort of said something. Tony Jordan, who's a British writer, who does
Mm.
Death in Paradise over here. It's like a Caribbean, a town, and then murder. It's like Murder She Wrote, but in the Caribbean island
Ah,
kind of
okay.
thing. And he did that. I definitely remember him saying like I could just see their eyes glazing over. And then he would just start to let her talk about, hey, so how are your kids?
Yeah,
You know, and
exactly.
then Eli Craig, I think he was the other one, and he said that sometimes people get lost or they don't know what you just said, or they got confused on a name or something, and they're bumping up against that, and they're still working on that while you've moved,
Sure.
2 minutes or 3 minutes ahead. And so it was a nice little check to make sure they're all up to speed.
Yeah,
Mm,
on that note, I think someone also said like if they can tell that the person they're pitching to is getting a little confused, that they'll actually pause the pitch, hit the pause button, and say, "Okay, do you have any questions? Are you
yeah,
able to follow it so far?" And I think the response was that a lot of the whoever they were pitching to was actually appreciative of that
yeah,
because they were kind of like, "Actually, now that you mention it,"
yeah,
and they would have to have the things filled in for them.
yeah.
But I also want to actually touch back on that you do have, I think it's an entire chapter on pitching,
We
which
do.
is
Yeah,
which I think I don't really think I've seen that in any recent screenwriting books. Maybe there are, but I don't recall seeing it. And I think what's really great is that because that is another aspect of the business that a lot of the books don't address. Because a lot of writers, as we said, like they figure I could just write it and I'll just have my reps in it out and that's all I
yeah,
need to do. And not realizing you're going to have to either, go in person or do it on Zoom and pitch that script, 90 seconds, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a half an hour.
right.
And it just, it can, I can just feel the writer just It's a sort of face to freezing in fear. Like, I got to
Yeah.
talk to people.
Yeah. I mean, how many writers are introverts? A
All
lot.
of them.
Yeah. So the idea that you have to sell is, and it's not, yeah, it's all that. And then what if you get staffed on the show? Where do you think the episodes come from? You're pitching ideas,
Yeah.
and more than that is, well, what if you're a writer director? Well, then you have to pitch talent. And what if you're oh, the usual, what you were just saying, or you're pitching a producer, or you're pitching anybody to just build your team out with the idea. You just need to, it's a necessary evil, or it can be a great joy if you're very performative. And we were glad to get that chapter in to,
Hmm.
say people, look, everybody does it, and everyone has tools and techniques, but it's something you have to do.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought was really good is as was it, you called it the box tips, or
Box
it was
outs.
box outs, that you had one I thought was great, that you talk about the different kinds of pitches. There was the
Yeah.
elevator pitch, which is usually about 5 to 10 seconds long.
Yeah.
This is the one I wrote it down because it struck such a chord with me. The cocktail party pitch,
Yeah.
which is like what, 2 to 3 minutes.
2 to 3 minutes. Yeah.
Because this line was perfect for me because this is my drink of choice. The gin and tonics don't take that long to make.
Right.
And I just thought, oh my God, that is just brilliant because it's so spot on. And
Yeah.
I think the ones after that were kind of like when you're in the office and it's like the
Yeah.
10 to 30 minute pitch, and which I think a lot of writers, even if, because I experienced this at Austin, just when I would meet another writer, say, oh, and see it on their badge, oh, like, tell me about, whatever, insert name of script here. And a lot of times that a majority of the writers had like a 5 to 10 second pitch ready to go, or they just give me the log line. But unfortunately, there were also like a handful who would just kind of like go into this long explanation. And like by the time we reached like the 2 to 3 minute mark, I'm just kind of like, please let this be over.
Yeah.
So, but you don't want to be rude and say, okay, wrap it up. Come on. Come on, I got a schedule to keep.
Yeah. 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 That's always the tricky one. And, the other thing with being introverts is sometimes you don't get social cues all that well
Mm,
too. So, it's a good rule of thumb. I mean, I teach screenwriting here too, as
mm,
a thing, and producing, and that I use that one a lot. We get them to pitch a lot just to try to get over the fear and feel it and say, okay, yeah, this is what 30 seconds feels like. This is what 2 to 3 minutes feels like. And don't move on unless you're given permission to move on.
mm,
That kind of thing. Try and hook. That's why be really hooky with your elevator pitch, to
mhm,
the point where they're, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more, or at least just send me the script and then
mm.
do that.
Okay.
But yeah,
So, okay. Well, actually, I also want to talk about you called the box outs again.
yeah,
Okay. So I just think that each one it's almost kind of like, for those who have not read the book, it's like a summary of all the I don't know, ideas and concepts that were presented in that chapter, like about, rewriting, or about finding your voice, or about the rules. So I was trying to, it kind of took me a time to, I had to go back and like skim through the chapter. Now, are those just kind of like, uh, what's the word? Like just a grouping of everything that everybody said, or was it kind of like just kind of a generalization of a lot of the things that were mentioned over the course of each answer?
yeah. It was kind of a sum up, if you were, and in summary, it's a typical thing in these sort of, you know, I don't want to call it an academic test because it's not, but it does fall into those into that, teaching tool kind of thing. And, we just thought, look, what's the way we can make this book as user friendly to people as
Hmm.
possible? And, if they're going to pick it up and they're just going to flick and they just see this thing at the end of the chapter, that's a chapter summary of what's going on. Maybe they'd be like, oh, that's interesting. And then go back and look at where it came from next. Or sometimes, you read it and then you fell asleep and you're like, what the hell happened? You go to the chapters, whatever it is that interrupted your flow or you didn't want to start. That
Uh-huh.
was it, to just make it a little user friendly for you at the end.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I also thought was really cool is that going into the book and only knowing a handful of the names, like I said, Beck and Woods and Meg LaFauve, But there
Yep.
were also the names of the writers that came up. I didn't know them, but then they would talk about like what they had worked on. Like as you said, that writer who had worked on Only Murders in the Building. Now, I've watched that, but
Hmm.
hearing them talk about the process of putting it together, and also, excuse me, a little bit about their background and working on that project, it helped kind of like make the end result a little more accessible for me. Like,
Mm.
oh, okay, so this is how they put together, like just an example, Only Murders in the Building. I kind of remember that Steve Martin was a co-writer on it, but
Mm.
hearing like there were other writers and that they would pitch like they were trying to figure out the best way to present the story that they wanted to present over the course of the season, and how can we break that down, and how can we flesh out each episode. I just thought it was just fascinating to see that whole process just laid out by someone who was right there in the middle of it.
Yeah. I mean, that sums up the book series
Hmm.
in general is this is someone who does this day in and day out. We have people at different levels, right? But still, that's you're going to see firsthand. This is how we break story.
Hmm.
Even if you have someone as um, seasoned or someone like Steve Martin, who's written countless things of all
Hmm.
sorts of all sorts of comedic kind of stuff, even dramatic stuff. Someone that seasoned, that well-known writer who just writes and writes and writes and writes, they still need help when it comes to a TV series. They still want ideas to bounce off of because that's the great thing about writers' room. You all these minds that you have different experiences and different backgrounds and different humor types and
Hmm.
different it just adds a nice flavor into the soup for someone like that, and hear someone who's in the room actually telling you how it works. That's really useful.
Yeah, actually, that is something I also wanted to point out is that there is a chapter about working in a writer's room and writing on set. These are things I don't think I've ever seen those covered in a book before. And I just thought this is something that, you've heard about, it's not like it's an urban legend or anything, but these are things you hear about, but you really never see discussed. So it's almost kind of like a real peek behind the curtain because I especially, even though I'm not into writing for TV, it was just fascinating to read about like how do you get a job in a writer's room, like what's involved, what should you expect, and if you're just starting out, or if it's a seasonal thing, or is it a steady job, and
Yeah.
like what does a showrunner do, and all that kind of stuff. So some of these things I was kind of sort of familiar with, but just to have these explained, so as we discussed before, that it's easy for someone not familiar with it to get a firm understanding of it because it's explained in pretty much, I guess, the simplest terms possible.
Yeah, exactly. Again, we didn't want to lose anybody. We're trying to we're trying to get people at emerging levels. We're trying to get people at intermediate levels. Maybe there's some stuff in there that very seasoned writers might find useful at sort of more advanced kind of stuff. But yeah, that was the purpose of all, was not to lose anybody, to try and make things clear and understandable so that when you find yourself in a position like this, you're not as green. You're like, oh yes, I think I did hear about that before, and then maybe you'll sense memory back to reading it. That was
Mhm.
exactly why we did that.
Yeah, one of the things I also thought was just really cool, just from a personal perspective, is that, like I said, I'd heard of some of these writers and I'd seen some of the projects they've all been involved with. But what was really cool for me was reading about someone's experience, like either working on a TV show or a film, and it was something I'd never heard of before. But the way they were describing it, and it would just make me think, okay, I want to know about this. So I did have to pause reading it and go on to open another window on my computer and like type in, okay, what is this, show that Tony Jordan worked on? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I may have heard it because I'm kind of familiar with a few British shows. Like, okay,
Mhm.
have I heard of that one? Okay, I think I know an actor who was on that one. But the one that really made me, I had to, I stopped reading, and it was, is it Barbara Stepansky?
Barbara Stepansky. Yeah.
Okay, so she said, when my script won the nickel,
Yeah.
and then she had the title, I was like, "What is this? What is this script? When did this happen? What is this script about?" I opened another tab. I typed in her name and the title of that, and it said nickel. And so she won. I guess she was one of the five finalists in 2013.
Yep.
So 11 years ago, and her script was called "Sugar in My Veins." I was like, "What the
Yep.
hell is that about?" And then it opened. So then, of course, Google, it gives me like a dozen different sites to find out about it. None of them was the Academy site, which I was a little surprised about. But some of them was about, some of them showed, here's a synopsis of the story, but it only got up to I thought it was the first act. It's only like page 6. And so I was like, okay. And then there was actual a site to start reading it. So I started reading the script. I'm supposed to
Yeah.
be reading your book, but I got so sidetracked. I wanted to see, what is this story? And I kept reading it. It was a very fast read. I got to about page 40. I said, okay, I have to stop because I have to get back to Andrew's book. So I can't finish reading it before I talk to him. But I just love the fact that reading about all these writers and their projects in your book, it motivated me to want to know more about these things that I didn't know about. And I just think but maybe it's just me, or if it's just like something that a writer's natural curiosity should kick in, like, okay, this writer, like the chapter on writing for horror comedy. I love horror comedy. So it's like,
Right.
okay, I want to know, like, I've seen this. Have I seen this? Okay, Tucker and Dale. Okay, I know I've seen that. And, Shaun of
Yeah.
the Dead, seen that. And it's just great that it opens up all these opportunities for you to, I guess, add to your writer's education. Now, was that intentional, or it's just the way it worked out?
Well, we were hoping so. I mean, we were hoping, we figured, I mean, we'd be fools to think that everybody out there would know all 34 of these people and be familiar with their work. I mean, there might be one person sitting in a basement someplace, mainlining energy drinks, just watching television, Netflix, and in the cinema 24 hours a day. But that's what we wanted to. I mean, we were hoping that people would find someone interesting. Like for me personally, it was the telenovela
Hmm.
chapter, because I didn't know. I had worked on, in one of my many phases, worked on Mexican and Latino oriented Spanish television. Okay, when I was doing production on a show like that, and so I was sort of familiar with them, but I didn't know how they were made. And to see what kind of I thought American soaps were meat grinders, but those are real meat grinders. And and how how they're taking the romantic comedy or and romantic drama genres and putting new spins on them, and how you have to be constantly creative in this when you're telling essentially the same story over and over and over and over and over again. And it made me want to seek those out and just say, oh, okay, so that's what they're doing, and how they're ramping up everything. And then for some of the foreign people, I wanted to check out the original Euphoria, for example, which was an Israeli TV series, and to see how, so you can see, oh, so I can kind of see how what they took for the American version that's super popular. It's like, okay, I can kind of recognize some of the characters, and I can kind of recognize the nihilism, and I can kind of recognize players, but obviously it's set in Tel Aviv, I think. And now you take that and put it in LA or Southern California, and you see different colors and different things that they're concerned about. But yeah, that's what we're hoping for. And then on top of that, at one of the final chapters on inspiration, we sort of sum up. There is a question where we ask, who inspires you? Because we wanted it to go on another level of not just looking at these people, what these people, hold dear. And so that you could go another level down the rabbit hole, check out what they liked as well. You can't read too much of this stuff. You can't watch too much. You need to just constantly keep doing that in your writing careers to keep developing.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think someone had also talked about, maybe this is from the inspiration chapter, that it was Billy Wilder, and I think The Apartment specifically, that they
Yeah,
just thought it was like one of their favorite movies, just on so many levels, about the dialogue and the characters and just the way it was shot, and it's just, it's great to see that there's no, everybody likes something different, and
yeah,
that you might not like it, but there's also something that someone else suggested, like, oh, that sounds intriguing and I want to know more. And
yeah,
I think it's great to have all these options and all these different routes that you can check things out. And actually, I want to go back to the resource aspect of the book, is that it's not just about craft and the business part of it, but you also have huge lists of, there's a really long list of books and writing podcasts, And I took note of this one because you have a long list of screenwriting blogs, and there's one that was not on it, which I was a little hurt by, but I'm not going to take it personally. I was going to say, shame on you, sir. No maximum D on that list. But also, you talk about courses and software, which I
Yeah.
thought those were great touches because, again, I mean, software kind of is mentioned every once in a while, but some of these things are just not really covered, I guess, because a lot of the writers who are putting these books together are like, okay, I'm going to focus on craft and maybe a little bit about business, but everything else, yeah, you can figure it out on your own.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, apologies.
Yeah, it's okay.
Next edition.
Of course. Quick, revise history and
Advisor
publisher.
Bloomsbury, hold the presses. Um, yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. I'm glad you saw that you found that useful. I think a lot of people want to know, well, where can I learn more? And a lot of look, I can tell this from a lot of emerging writers, and because a lot of I work with I'm a college professor. It's my day job, and I'm working with 18 to 22-year-olds, and they don't have a lot of money.
Mhm.
And so going out and buying Final Draft or Writer Duet or I don't know, it's Highland, John August's one. I don't know if that
Oh,
costs money.
I can't remember, but I know Movie Magic is another one.
Movie Magic's right, Screenwriter. I know that one costs money. They can't do that. So what do? Well, students being students, they start writing in Microsoft Word
Yep.
and or Pages, or even better, text app,
Oh God.
just on their phone. And look, it look, if it's a good story, if it's amazing, if it holds my attention, great. I could say that, but 9 times out of 10, it's not. Well, actually, 99 times out of 100, it's not. And it's just hard then for me to give them feedback about, okay, you're a little long here, you're a little short there. Maybe you want to bring in this person early, because I really don't know where they are in page count and that sort of thing. And you'd be surprised about how many conversations I have with writers about, well, what should I be writing it? And where do I find that? And I want to go down more rabbit holes. Where can I go?
Mhm.
There you are.
Yeah, that's one of the things that because I do this presentation about screenwriting and I have to tell the writers, do not write a script in Microsoft Word. And they're like, oh, and then I have to tell them, well, there's actual special screenwriting software you can get.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know it can be cost prohibitive, but if you want to put in the time and the effort, you might as well, spend a couple of bucks to get there.
Yeah, it really does help. I mean, for people who are reading, and you already have so much against you. You have so much going against you when you're starting out to get someone to read your script in the first place, who knows something of what you're doing, let alone someone who's who could actually do something for you. And the I can't tell you how many, spelling mistakes and typo errors and
Hmm.
bad formatting and all this stuff that comes on. And, at least in this case, they're learning. So it's my job to kind of, clean that all off and punch them in the shape, so to speak. But yeah, if you're doing that outside of that kind of center, you should, the screenwriting software just takes care of so many of those problems. So you can just focus on telling the story and not have to worry about, wait, do I do control 3 or control 4? Wait, how, what do I do?
Oh no, I just made everything bold in
Yeah,
my
everything's
script.
bold, and it's wait, all the frames, the panes have split. What?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Andrew, okay, so the book is Guerrilla Guide, Screenwriters Advice from Popular and Award-Winning Film, TV, and Streaming Shows. Oh, we didn't even get into writing for streaming, because there's a whole section about that as well, because
Yeah,
that is almost, it gets, unknown territory for a lot of writers.
it is. And the good news is a lot of the techniques for television and film hold, but the people who you're writing for have, well, people who you're writing for always have an agenda, but these people have data that's immediate, and you know they the notes come a little bit faster, I guess, maybe.
Hmm.
They have different things that they're worrying about.
Yeah,
you know?
that's very true, and also that is also something that a lot of writers now need to start taking into consideration. Like, do I want to
Yeah.
take this? Do I want to take this to a network? Do I want to take this to a production company? Do I want to try and pitch it to a streamer? Because that is an option that even just a couple of years ago wasn't there.
Yeah. And then on the business side, this is such a fluid thing right now. I'll just tell you, if you're selling something to a feed to Netflix, the way the money that you get is, slightly different. I know that the more recent WGA agreement tried to address a lot of the residual um, problems that they were having as far as how you get how writers and actors, I suppose, and get paid for a number of streams. But that's still a work in progress of how that's going to work. And then the streamers or those that are subscription based are realizing like, we can't seem to make so much stuff when we only have so much money coming in. Our
Mhm.
investors are going to want to return at some point, and how that comes into play more than something a more traditional CBS or BBC or Paramount.
Mhm. Well, yeah, turbulent times indeed, and you cannot go wrong by having the Guerrilla Guide Screenwriters Advice from popular and award-winning film, TV, and streaming shows at your side because it'll help you navigate those very treacherous waters, as we would say. Andrew Zinnes, so where can people find this amazing resource of a book?
Well, Amazon, always a great place to find it. However, if they act quickly, hopefully this will be out soon. If they go to the Bloomsbury.com website, which is our publisher, Bloomsbury, and you search for it, we have a code where you can get 25% off any version of the book, so hardcover or uh, ebook or what or regular soft cover. So if you just put in capital S, capital A 25, so that's capital S, capital A 25 at the Bloomsbury.com website. Hopefully that helps you out a little bit.
Wow, that is a great exclusive offer that I don't know if you're going to find anywhere else.
Yeah.
At least I
But you
hope
better
not.
get on it soon because Lord knows how long Bloomsbury is going to keep that up.
There you go. Nothing that putting a little pressure on. Andrew, this
Yeah,
has
there you go.
been such a
Sell,
great
sell.
conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a great experience. I
Okay.
hope you're, bye, everybody.
We're not done yet. Where can people find out more about you? Is there a Andrew Zinnes website, or is there somewhere that people can check out more about you?
Uh, you can probably find me probably at my work website. So if you just Google Andrew Zinnes, University of Portsmouth, UK, I'll pop up.
Okay. Are you on social media at all?
Yes, you can get me at Facebook. It's just me, Andrew Zinnes, at Instagram, Zinnes Andrew. That's where I usually hang out.
Okay. Well,
Feel free
fantastic.
to contact me.
Oh yeah, that is great stuff, Andrew. Well, again, thank you for being here today, listeners and viewers. Feel free to like and subscribe. Make sure to tell your friends. We can always use the followers. You can check out my screenwriting blog, Maximum Z, the one we talked about just a couple of minutes ago. Maximum Z at maximumz.blog. I'm on Twitter at maximum_Z. I'm on Instagram at Pez Screenwriting, PEZ, because those are my initials. And you can check out my Go Ahead and Ask books on Amazon, the books about screenwriting and pie. And Mr. Zinnes here, he is in volume number 3. So if you want to see what he had to say a couple of years ago about the questions that I had for him, feel free to check that out. So again, Andrew, thank you for being here. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. I'm Paul. He's Andrew. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.